It's Fan Fiction Friday. Let's see what you came up with. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Friday, December 15th, 2023. This is Tidy Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on. That's LOCKEDON to get yourself started. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. This is Fan Fiction Friday, the show where you submit your Mariners trade proposals and we grade them on the 20 to 80 scouting scale. Kachikaku has a deal with the Pirates. Connor Joe for Walter Ford and Prolander Baroa. Colby.
Connor Joe, could he help you? Sure, off the bench. As maybe if you really want a really cheap platoon partner with like Dom Canzone, if you think Dom needs a platoon partner, which statistically speaking, we don't really have any evidence needs to be the case, but we watched some of those at bats, so you be the judge there. But it's about $2 million this year for him. He's not an everyday player. Prolander Baroa profiles as at least mid-leverage reliever with high leverage stuff, and if you can throw a few more strikes, he would be a high leverage reliever. I don't know how much more you can take out of this bullpen, because right now he is pretty much written in pen to be a part of the opening day bullpen, which I wouldn't call ideal, but it's the reality of the situations.
Right. Well, and we've said this in the past that like they're probably not going to get a high leverage reliever this offseason via free, like an established high leverage reliever. So out of the guys that are in your organization right now, he has probably the highest ceiling to be that guy, to be that third guy, and not necessarily take Paul Sewald's spot in the bullpen or take that role on, but to be that third guy that they've been missing since they traded Sewald.
Yeah. Plus, there's an outside possibility that this team may need to trade Brash or Andres Munoz to get the bat that they need. Sure. And that's unfortunate that they're put in that position, but that is the position they might find themselves in. So you just don't want to be, giving away high leverage arms. They brought in a couple of interesting arms in their trades, but I don't think you can count on any of them. They are less likely to step up and fill in the Sewald gap than Baroa is. So and I also think it's an overpay for just kind of a run of the mill major leaguer like Walter Ford for him. I think is fine. I think if it's Michael Morales, I think you're fine. But I think if you're giving away a prospect with serious upside that is ready to help you this year, I think you're paying a little too much for Connor Joe, because quite frankly, I could go give Carlos Santana $3.5 million and get roughly the same production at the plate as I would from Connor Joe and keep Prolander Baroa. That's just a route I would rather go. So for me, it's an overpay. Kudos for coming up with a name that we haven't really talked about. It's nice to see trades that aren't just Randy Arozarena or Lars Nootbaar. So I'm sure we don't have any of those coming up, but I would say it's an overpay. So I'm going to give it like a 40. I think I'll go 40.
I feel like it's a bit too aggressive to say that it's an overpay. We're talking about a guy in Connor Joe who's coming off. He's coming off of a 2-win season. Now, the first half of the season is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. 1.9.
Cade Marlowe was like a one player in like half the time. Are we crowding him?
I get it. I totally get it. I'm just saying that there is. I'm just saying that there's a decent chance that Connor Joe impacts your season over the course of more games than Prolander Baroa does in 2024. But that's obviously not how it works, right? Because we're talking about a controllable asset here with Baroa, who has a very high ceiling. I mean, there's definitely a possibility here that he ends up just being a guy that has really good stuff but can't find the strike zone, like we've seen in the past with guys like Gerson Bautista and Tiago Vieira, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But
guys like
it's also
Andres
very
Munoz and Matt Brash.
But yeah, exactly. But there's also a very good chance on the other hand that he is Matt Brash, that he is Andres Munoz, that he is that third guy that you desperately need there on the back end of your bullpen, that you're probably not going to go out, like I said earlier, and get this offseason. So I don't think I would do this trade. I don't think the Mariners would do this trade. I don't think it's necessarily an overpay in the way that
It is.
Colby is saying, but I think the valuation overall is actually fine. But relative to what the Mariners need right now, to where their roster is right now, what the other options are that are alike Connor Joe out on the market, I'll give this, because you mentioned a name that we haven't really talked about, I'll give it a 45. I just don't think this is a deal that the Mariners would do, though. Yeah, roll your eyes all you want. All right, next trade here from Roomba Hive Mind. That's a hell of a name. Prolanda Baroa once again for Ryan O'Hearn. All right, so does this get your gears going, Colby, on a Prolanda Baroa trade? Ryan O'Hearn, who was hitting pretty consistently in the top 4 of the Orioles lineup this past year.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. No, because again, like I'm trying to build a bullpen on the cheap, especially now since I don't have the money that I thought I had. Baroa is the guy in this bullpen that gives me the most upside for the cheapest price. And if I'm not going to trade that guy for somebody who I really believe is like, definitely going to impact my lineup, I'm just not going to do it. And while O'Hearn had a nice breakout year last year, there's a large chunk of his career that shows that he's a 4A player. So how much do I want to trust that? Not a ton. So, and by the way, if I was going to trade Baroa to Baltimore, why wouldn't I just go ask for like Anthony Santander? I think that's reasonable. So I just don't trust O'Hearn enough, based off of 365 plate appearances. Like I'm not going to trust that to go and trade one of my better trade chips in the minors for that guy, particularly when this prospect, I should say, is going to impact my 2024 bullpen. I'm just not making that deal. So I don't think this is a bad one. I like it more than Connor Joe, but only barely. So I think it's probably like a 42, because at least Joe's done it a couple of times. Ryan O'Hearn has never really done it with the exception of this last year, but O'Hearn was better than Joe offensively this year. So pretty similar deal. I think it's a bit of an overpay if you're giving up a row for one of these types of guys, but I want somebody with a little bit more of a track record than O'Hearn, and I want somebody with a little bit more upside than Joe if I'm trading Baroa. So I guess I give this one like a 40, 45, somewhere in that range.
I think the Orioles actually say no to this deal because we know that they're not going to spend a lot of money, and O'Hearn's obviously coming off a good year, and they've built a really nice offense there in Baltimore. And I don't know if they're necessarily going to subtract from that because, again, they're not going to spend a ton of money, and they've already addressed their bullpen in a pretty big way with Craig Kimbrell, and they spent probably the biggest contract they're going to spend all offseason on Kimbrell there. So I don't know if Baroa is necessarily worth them trading a guy who, again, hit in the top 4 of their lineup fairly consistently over the past season. So, but I also have some pretty big concerns about O'Hearn, like you as well, because I mean, he doesn't walk at all, and he has posted high strikeout rates over the last few years. I could see him easily regressing in a pretty significant way this upcoming year. I just have a bit more concern about O'Hearn, in terms of just like, I think he might end up being that 70-ish WRC plus guy that he was for the first few years of his career. And yeah, I feel like, I know this is probably weird to say coming off of the year that O'Hearn is and Joe is, but I feel more confident in Joe producing relative to his career norms or relative to what he did this past year than O'Hearn. I'll still give it a 40 to 45, somewhere in there, just like the Joe deal. But yeah, I have some issues there with Ryan O'Hearn for sure. All right, so we got a few more trades coming up here in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and a whole lot more. And the Mariners might not be playing right now, but the Kraken and Seahawks are. So whether the action is on turf or on the ice, whether it's Jared McCann or Geno Smith, you can bet on it all with FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's LOCKDON and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the National Football League. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. And as a reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ham Swaggerty 69 has a deal here with the Marlins. Bryce Miller, Gabriel Gonzalez, Lazaro Montes, and Jeter Martinez for Jazz Chisholm and Trevor Rogers.
I like Trevor Rogers. I assume you heard us talking about him on our Patreon show the other day. We kind of pitched a similar idea of maybe you're trying to, with Josh Bell, of course, at the time. Maybe you take on Josh Bell's contract so you can also get, Jazz Chisholm or Trevor Rogers or something like that. But I think the issue with this deal is that Miami's probably not going to trade Jazz Chisholm for pitching. If Bryce Miller's the best they can get, they're probably just going to hold on to that guy because the Marlins have pitching. Like, they have excess pitching. So they're not really looking to add more to it. Even if they get nothing out of Trevor Rogers, they still feel really good about their pitching staff. So I don't think that that's going to be enough to carry this deal. I think if you're looking to acquire both of these guys, I think you're looking at like Harry Ford, Gabriel Gonzalez, and maybe somebody like, I don't know, Josh Rojas or Ty France or it's going to cost somebody from your major league roster, but it's also going to it can't be a pitcher. Like, a pitcher can't carry this deal because it doesn't help Miami all that much. So if you're going to get Rogers and Jazz, I think it's going to cost you 2 of your top 5 at minimum, and then probably some pretty good secondary pieces. So I think, if Miami didn't need pitching, I think this deal makes a lot of sense, but they don't need it. So I don't think Miller carries as much weight in this type of deal as he would in, say, a Tampa Bay trade or a Baltimore trade or something like that. So, fun idea, creative idea. I think the valuation's off just because, again,
I just don't think the two teams line up.
Yeah,
well.
it's team specific. Like,
yeah,
these two type of players on a different team for that package. Yeah, I think that would make some sense. But just because it's the Marlins, you kind of are in the same spot as they are, right? You have a little bit of a limited budget. You feel like you're ready to take a step forward. So you're trying to navigate with a limited payroll to jump ahead and take that next step. And so when those two teams come together in a trade, it's usually pretty complicated. And I don't think that they match up too well unless the Mariners are taking on like Josh Bell's contract or something like that, which we've talked about a little bit on the Patreon show. So interesting idea. Definitely more creative than some of the other ones we're used to seeing. So, and I think the valuation is pretty close. I think it's more or less accurate, but just team specifically, I think it's probably, I don't know, between 45 and a 50, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I'll give it a 50 because I think the valuation is good. I think it's unique. I think it's creative. I just don't think that the two teams line up. Like, I cannot imagine this deal actually going through. That this is actually like a realistic trade that would happen. Because like you said, the Marlins, even without Sandy Alcantara right now, still have a ton of pitching as is. They don't like, obviously everyone wants pitching no matter what the circumstances are, and obviously young controllable starting pitching that already has some established work in Major League Baseball is super, super attractive, which is why we've said, when the report about the Royals being interested in Bryce Miller came out, or in the Mariners young pitching rather, I don't know if it was specifically Miller, everyone is. Like we said, everyone is. Every single team is interested in that to a certain degree. But the Marlins trading Jazz Chisholm, who we know, I mean, obviously a lot of concerns there, but if he can stay healthy at his best, he's an MVP candidate. Do they really want to trade that for a position for, the headliner being at a position of strength for them already? I don't think so. I can't imagine that being the case. And obviously, Trevor Rogers has the potential to be a mid-rotation starter, just like Bryce Miller. Obviously, I would think that Miller has more upside now at this point in time in his career compared to Rogers, but I think it's close enough there that the Marlins wouldn't do this deal. I think there's a lot of reasons for the Marlins not to do this deal.
Because then the Marlins have to go out and they have to replace Jazz Chisholm.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little harder to do.
Yeah. So I'll give it a 50 though, because I think it's good valuation. I think it makes a lot of sense from a lot of different angles, but it doesn't make a lot of sense from a lot of different angles at the same time. So won't go further than that, but good job overall. Still, I understand the thought process. I get it. Bleer 91 has a deal with the Red Sox. Outfielder Jarren Duran and second baseman Emmanuel Valdez for Bryce Miller and Jonathan Clase.
Yeah, I'm not a big Duran fan. And it's mostly because I look at the profile, I look at the numbers, and I go, look, he's coming off of a good year. There's no denying that. 120 WRC plus, 2.5 win player. But when I watch this guy play, I look at him and I go, I think he's an average. He's an everyday average player. And if I'm trading Bryce Miller, I want more than average. Here's the upside of Duran though. Really fast guy. Should be okay in a corner outfield spot. I don't think he's made for center field. There's not a ton of home run power. So this is a guy who's probably ideally hitting, 9, but probably hits 1 for most teams. There's just not a ton of pop here. The walk percentages are pretty mediocre. The strikeout percentages aren't great. They're not bad. They're certainly not bad, but they're not great. And when I look at what I'm going to trade Bryce Miller for, I think if I'm trading him for a guy with, if I'm trading him because of club control, which Duran is a club control ad, not a impact ad, as of right now at least, then I think I want potential star if I'm trading Bryce Miller for a club control guy. I don't see Duran as a star. I don't think it's terrible because if Duran is your starting left fielder, okay, it's not ideal because he really should be playing center with his power profile, but obviously that's not going to happen. And Valdez, to me though, he's just kind of he's Josh Rojas. I feel like I have that guy already in my back pocket. I don't really care that much about trading Clase. I'm not huge on Jonathan Clase. There's a lot of red flags there. So overall, I think this deal it's not bad. I wouldn't be upset if the Mariners made this deal in real life. It's just for me, if I'm trading Miller, I want impact, or if I have to get club control, I want potential star. And I just don't think Duran is going to do that, playing left field for you, not hitting a ton of home runs, not drawing a ton of walks. I see him stopping just short of a star. Quality
he feels
player.
very Andrew Benintendi.
He does. Yeah. Minus the 20 home run power. So,
right.
And the Gold Glove defense. He's Benintendi light. So, like I said, it's not the worst idea. I've certainly seen worse, but it just feels a little light to me. So sometimes it's just about feel. And like I said, I wouldn't be upset if they made this trade. Wouldn't love it though, because I feel like if I'm trading Miller and I have to go out and replace Bryce Miller, I need to hit a home run with what I'm getting back for Bryce Miller, if that makes sense. Because now in this trade, I got to go out and sign a number 4 starter. And is it worth, is Jarren Duran worth that headache? For me, no. But it's solid. I'll give it a 50. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it a 50 to 55 because I do like Durant. I get the thought process here. And also getting someone like Valdez, who's already been up at the major league level and has produced a little bit, that also helps to give you another option at second base as well. I don't like him as the guy, but as an option to just kind of get in the mix there, totally. And Duran, obviously doesn't have the over the wall power like you mentioned, but he does slug. He slugged
Yeah.
482 this year. He
Mhm.
hit 34 doubles. Like he does have some power, and maybe there is a tweak there that could lend to some more over the wall power. But I think at most you're
How
probably
much
expecting 12 to 15 home runs on the high end a
how
season.
much power how does that power play at T-Mobile going from
Yeah.
Fenway to T-Mobile?
Going to Fenway, yeah, going from Fenway to T-Mobile, obviously going from the short porch there in right field and Fenway to,
Yeah.
uh,
Still
and
a short
obviously,
porch, but not as short, clearly.
yeah, well, and obviously the lefties do profile pretty well there at T-Mobile Park,
Mhm.
but how much more, if at all, can you get out of Duran's bat from that point of view at T-Mobile Park? I think that's a very fair question to ask. But Duran is someone that's proven that he can hit for a high average, that can
Mhm.
slug despite not having the over the wall power.
Sure.
But again, when we're talking about think about some of the other guys that we have talked about with regards to Miller's market and who we would prefer to trade Miller for, Isak Paredes, Randy Arozarena, etc. Um, do you think that Jarren Duran is better than those guys?
No.
Yeah. So, and that's also a question for our listeners here that are tuning in right now. Ask yourself that: would you rather have Jarren Duran than Royce Lewis? Right? Would you rather have Jarren Duran than Isak Paredes? Um, so it's
Yeah.
I think that's just a very long-winded way of saying I do like Duran. If they made this trade, okay, I understand it, but he's not my first choice. He's
No,
kind
at
of
some
far from
point
it.
yeah, at some point, beggars can't be choosers. I'm looking for more of a corner, profile, and I just don't think that Duran is that, but like I said, I am willing to admit that I am low man on Duran for reasons I can't quite explain. There's just something about his game that I don't think quite adds up to, a 120 WRC plus guy. But I could be wrong.
Sure,
And,
sure.
like I said, if the Mariners made this trade, I could defend it. I'd be like, okay, no, I see what they're going for here.
You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here on Fan Fiction Friday. We got a couple more of your trades to grade. We're going to get to this one from Alex, which is a deal with the Cleveland Guardians. Bryce Miller, Jose Caballero, Jonathan Clase to the Guardians for Josh Naylor. I like Josh Naylor a lot, but it's 2 years for a first base / DH type. No, great first base / DH type. Josh Naylor. Awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome bat. But for 6 years of Bryce Miller, of a potential mid rotation starter who's already had some really nice success at the major league level, and I have to throw in more. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? Caballero, Clase, I'm not too high on either one of those guys, but I have to throw in more on top of the 6 years of a potential mid rotation starter for 2 years of a first base / DH type. I'm good. I'll pass.
Yeah, I would really struggle to give up Miller for anybody for somebody who has less than 3 years of club control, unless it's a star, which Naylor is not. Good player, good hitter, not a
Yeah,
star. I do think this is probably something close to what it would have to look like though to get Cleveland interested. Like you're going to have to
probably.
overpay for Naylor. I just don't think the Mariners should be the team to do that. Um, like I could make this trade, or I could probably just give up Clase and Caballero and go get Harold Ramirez. Like I'd rather do that and then just keep Miller. So I think this is the type of offer you would have to make to Cleveland to get them to listen on moving Naylor because they really have no reason to move Naylor. So you kind of have to blow them away. But for me, if I'm the Mariners, this is a non-starter. I'm not interested in that because again, like I can go get Harold Ramirez for less. And he's
Mhm.
not as good as Naylor, but he's pretty close. And again, I can keep Bryce Miller. So I like Naylor. I think Naylor is a great fit for what Seattle needs. I think he fits the ballpark really well. I think his profile is really set up to succeed at T-Mobile. I totally get why Mariner fans would want Naylor and might be willing to overpay for him a little bit. That's just not me. Like I'm not giving up 6 years of Bryce Miller for 2 years of Josh Naylor, let alone adding on a kind of a useful 4A utility type and Clase's upside is as much as I don't love Clase as a prospect, his upside is still very real. So I think this is an overpay. And I don't think it's an overpay for a star. It'd be interesting if Naylor had one more year of club control. If I got 3 years of Naylor, I'd be much more on the fence about this one. But with just 2 years and I have to add on top of Miller,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm in.
I'm gonna give this one a 30.
I give it like a 35.
Last trade of the day comes from Seattle or Bust. So we got the same exact trade from two separate people in underneath our Fanfiction Friday tweet. I believe this one came first. I think so. I'm not 100% sure. So if I mess that up, I am so sorry to Daisy and the Dingo, who also submitted this same exact trade. One of you, though, I'm going to assume stole this idea from the other, because it is the exact same deal, like the exact same. And I have a very, very hard time wrapping my head around the idea that you both just so happen, coincidentally, came up with this same exact structure for this 3-team deal.
Somebody forgot to switch out of their burner.
Or that.
Which one of you Kevin Duranted? Or since you're the same person, we got you.
Either way, I do actually think this idea is pretty interesting. So we're going to talk about it. It's a 3-team deal with the Rays and the White Sox. The Mariners get Randy Arozarena, Dylan Cease, Eloy Jimenez, and cash from the White Sox. The White Sox get Curtis Mead, Xavier Isaac, and Gabriel Gonzalez. And the Rays get Logan Gilbert, and that's it. So essentially it is for the Rays, from the Rays perspective, Randy Arozarena, Curtis Mead, and Xavier Isaac for Logan Gilbert. The Mariners are trading Logan Gilbert and Gabriel Gonzalez for Arozarena, Cease, Jimenez, and cash. I don't know what that cash is. You need to be more specific. Though Daisy and the Dingo said $5 million cash, so we'll go with that. We'll say it's $5 million cash. And then the White Sox get Mead, Isaac, and Gonzalez for Jimenez and Cease. All right, I think we're all caught up on that. Hopefully, you guys were able to keep up with all that. Colby, what do you think?
I don't know if this is enough for the White Sox. Like, I like Curtis Mead plenty. Gabriel Gonzalez is a good prospect. He's not an elite prospect like some Mariner fans make him out to be. It just feels like a ripoff of the 3-team proposal I had on my solo show last Saturday, just with a different team mixed in. So
yes.
What was the inspiration for this deal, I wonder?
Yes, sure.
Because clearly I thought of that idea first, obviously.
Right. And that's only an idea that you could ever have and no one else can. Yeah.
Yes, obviously.
Yeah. You can only think of 3-team deals with the Rays and the White Sox. Yep.
I mean, mine was with the Dodgers, but it was the Dodgers, the Mariners, and the White Sox. But you know, he just so happened to be getting Dylan Cease and Eloy Jimenez, which was also in my trade. So whatever. Right. You know, using Logan Gilbert, getting prospects, and then swapping some of those prospects. Yeah.
Sure.
It all smells very familiar here.
It's
an interesting deal. Certainly, if you're trading Logan Gilbert and Gabriel Gonzalez and you're getting Arozarena, Cease, and Jimenez, you probably have to do it. Like, I don't think you're in a position to say no to that. While Gilbert is, I think, pretty much undoubtedly the best player getting moved in this trade, you are getting an everyday left fielder who has all-star upside. You're getting a, number 3 starter to replace Gilbert, who does have more upside. And you're getting Eloy Jimenez, who, while the White Sox may hold a funeral for him every single year, when he does play and when he is healthy, he's pretty good. He's a pretty good hitter. He's a DH only, though. Like, that is what he is. You're not getting away with him in the outfield. So I think it's pretty good. I don't think the White Sox are getting enough, would be my one concern here. I don't know if Curtis Mead and Isaac and Gonzalez is quite enough to give up Cease and Eloy. I feel like they could probably get more if they traded those two guys separately. So not bad. Definitely creative. It is unfortunate that Seattle has to part with Logan, but to get Arozarena, Cease, and Eloy probably was going to be the case. I just don't think the White Sox are getting quite enough. And I'm not sure if the Mariners would add enough on their end to make this deal happen, or if the Rays would be interested in adding more on their end. Because from the Rays perspective, Rosarena, Mead, and Isaac for Logan, I think that's probably about what they would feel is an appropriate amount. So I'll give this one a 55. It's definitely creative. The valuation I don't think is terrible at all, and it's certainly I don't think it's that realistic, but I think it's a fun trade. I think it's unique. I think it's creative. I think the valuation is about right. I think the three teams actually fit pretty well as trade partners. So I'll give it a 55.
Yeah, I was going to say that you can definitely see a way where all three of these teams kind of need one another, which is, what you want when you're trying to come up with a 3-team deal. Like, what is the actual practicality of this team being involved, right? Does this team actually need to be, can just two of these parties hammer out a deal on their own? Because that's usually what happens with a lot of these 3-team deals, where it's just like, what is the purpose of this other third team? Like, why are they here? Like, the other two teams can just make this same deal with one another. Like, it doesn't really, but like the Rays probably don't want Cease, or they would rather have Gilbert than Cease, because Gilbert has more club control, is less expensive right now than Cease is. And if like the White Sox really want Curtis Mead, right? If that's kind of like one of their goals and a return for Dylan Cease, then again, if the Rays don't want Dylan Cease, but they want Logan Gilbert, then I can see why the White Sox would try and get involved in this if they want Curtis Mead really bad. I think it's slightly better than a 55, but not good enough to be a 60, so I'll give it a 58. I think it's really creative, and again, look, there has to be like a 3-team deal, like premium, right? Because these things are so hard to come up with, and this actually does make sense. Like, it doesn't make me want to bang my head against the wall. So yeah, you get points for that. So I do think it makes a lot of sense in a lot of different areas, and also whoever actually came up with this deal first, there's actual purpose for all three of these teams to be involved in this deal. Whereas with a lot of 3-team deals, that isn't the case. So you also get points for that. So again, 58 on this deal. So good stuff all around too. Whoever came up with this deal, whether it was Seattle or Bus, Daisy and the Dingo, or maybe you're the same person and you just, you Kevin Duranted yourself. Who knows? But that's going to do it for Fan Fiction Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Dane Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Ty Dane Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.